Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the next presentation at MBB Research High-Tech Engineering Conference. I'm happy to welcome Mr. Biller, who will walk us through the presentation of GEA Group. GEA is a leading supplier of systems and components for the food and beverage, and as well for the pharmaceutical industries worldwide. And I guess some customers are quite familiar to everybody of us. So before we dive in to GEA's equity story, this conference is being recorded and all participants are in a listen-only mode. After the presentation of some 20 minutes, we will have time for a few questions. And please submit your question by using the chat box. GEA is part of our coverage at the MBB Research, and I will provide you a link to our latest research as well. And with this, I'd like to hand it over to you, Mr. Biller. Happy to have you with us today.
Thank you for the introduction. Greetings, everybody. Who is GEA? Because usually the name is not that familiar, like Airbus or Daimler or BMW. We are a producer of machines, mainly focusing on the food, beverage, and pharmaceutical companies of this world, meaning a company like Mondelez is our customer, JBS or Tyson, but the same goes obviously also to Danone, Nestlé, Heineken, and so on. So actually, if you go to the supermarket, to your Edeka, Rewe, Tesco, if you're from UK, in some way you've been in touch with products that have been produced on our machines. Just maybe to give you an overview, what is it that we actually really do and which markets are we on or active in? For example, if you look at the food sector, every fourth package of spaghetti is produced on our machines. For example, Barilla is a very famous and well-known customer here in Europe. We do here, for example, the extrusion technology or also the bakery equipment here. Every third chicken nugget is produced using our technology. So it's not only the McDonald's nuggets, so McDonald's is also a customer of ours, but also the ones that you see in your Rewe or other supermarkets, they also produce their nuggets on our machines. In the beverage sector, we're pretty strong in the beer brewing, for example. Every second liter of beer is brewed on our machines. This is also an interesting fact that our CEO usually tells his customers or his people to drink 2 liters of beer instead of 1, because hence it guarantees sort of the value of GEA then. Another important fact is also 1/4 of processed milk comes from GEA production systems, meaning regardless where you are worldwide, out of the gallon of milk that is available there, roughly 1 liter is coming from GEA machines. And a very similar figure also applies, for example, for instant coffee. As a matter of fact, I know if you drink Nescafe in South America, this comes through our equipment. And the same goes to other machines in North America, Asia, and also Europe. And for the pharmaceutical sector, it's a little bit more difficult. For example, every second tablet to treat cancer is made on our equipment. Or in general, if you think about it that way, if you use like any painkillers that are in tablet form, it might be the case that they have been produced in our machines. So while these overall markets are all relatively singular and small, if you look at the overall company, how big are we actually? So last year we had almost 5.4 billion in sales and had a profitability margin. So our profitability is measured as EBITDA before restructuring. It was 15.4% last year. We achieved this all with roughly 18,000 employees. And our goal is to increase both sales and profitability going into the future. So how is the firm overall structured? Regarding our markets, if you look at our markets, as I mentioned before, food, beverage, and pharmaceutical markets, they're relatively resilient and slowly growing. So over the past 20 years, these markets have been growing between 3 and 5%. With relatively low volatility. So the volatility in the food and beverage market was on average 1.2%, and it covered roughly 70% of our sales. From a pharmaceuticals market, it was roughly 4%, and it covered 7% of sales. Why is this the case? It's relatively simple. Regardless if there's peace or war, regardless if there's a new economy boom or financial market bust, people need to consume roughly 2,000 calories or more to to stay alive, basically, and they also get ill from time to time. Meaning, our customers, they have a relatively stable demand, meaning that also we ourselves have a relatively stable demand for our equipment. So you won't see sales increases by 10% or 15% in a single year, but on the other hand, you also won't see 10 or 15% declines. So when we look back at the last crisis, so let's just take COVID, our order intake decreased only by 5%. Instead, while other engineering companies who were focusing on other markets, it decreased by more than 20%. Another important factor for GEA, and it also shows its resilience, we have a very diversified customer base. So our largest customer is responsible for roughly 2% of our total sales. The top 10 customers are 11%, and the top 100 customers are roughly 33%. So if I would give you an Excel sheet with all our customers, you would probably recognize like 50 of them, like Heineken, Carlsberg, Diageo, all the famous breweries, Merck, Pfizer, GlaxoSmith, or any other large pharmaceutical. And the same goes for Nestlé, Danone, and other companies. But honestly, after the 4,000th row of our customers, yeah, you will be finished basically. So you recognize like 50 names on that list, but many are mom and pop shops, basically private labels that you've never heard of and you've never seen. For example, I've never heard of Grupo Bimbo in Mexico, but they're a large producer of snacks there. And the same goes also, for example, to China. Yili and Mengniu are large dairy producers there, but you've never heard them here in Europe, basically. We're also a relatively balanced regional profile. So if you look at our overall sales distribution on the right, Europe, since we're a European company, is responsible for almost 50% of total sales. So roughly half the sales come from Europe, 20% come from North America, and roughly 20 to 21% come also from the Asia Pacific region. And the rest, so 7 to 8%, so roughly 1/12 comes then from Latin America. Coming now to the overall structure of the business, we have 5 divisions. Let's start with the first one. This is separation and flow technologies. What do they actually do? As the name suggests, they separate things, and the things are either fluids from other fluids or solids from fluids. This technology is widely used, starting, for example, in the dairy industry. If you start with fresh milk and you want to separate the fat out of the milk, you use our equipment. Since fat has a little bit different profile than the rest of the milk. The same goes also, for example, to breweries. Heineken uses our separators, or also Carlsberg. This goes further for Merck or for Pfizer, for example. They use also our separators in their pharmaceutical research. However, you can also use this technology in other parts of the world, basically. For example, if you're on Saudi Aramco or Chevron or Exxon, you also use our separators to separate them, for example, the dirt out of the oil, because the general industrial process is always the same, separating solids from fluids or fluids from other fluids. This division has also a relatively high service share, so it's roughly 50%, and it's also the most profitable business that we're having. So current last 12 months margin is 27-28%, and this is also the reason why it's responsible with a quarter of the sales of the overall business for almost half of the profitability of the business. Then coming to the next division, this is liquid and powder technologies. As the name suggests, they are mainly active in liquid business and powder. Liquid, for example, would be if Heineken builds a new brewery, they are bidding on the entire facility. They won't build the building itself. This is going to be somebody else, but they can basically build everything inside. So starting from the ingredients to the almost finished product in the end, they can build you the entire facility. And for the powder stuff, this would be here, for example, for the dairy powder, meaning if you have kids and you use baby formula at any point, you might have also used the powder that has been used that has been produced on our machines. While this is the largest division regarding sales, so roughly 1/3 of the overall sales of the company comes from this division. It has a lower profitability. This is roughly like 11.5% for the last 12 months. Why is this the case that it's such low profitability? They usually also import and insource large pieces of equipment. Since, for example, we don't produce the tubing or any other parts here, we focus mostly on the engineering and the process engineering, meaning our engineers know how to produce the entire facility, but not necessarily also build everything themselves. They're also relatively low service share compared to the rest of the business. This is also coming from the part that some pieces that are sourced from us but are third-party equipment, they are also then serviced by others, for example, then the customer himself or also third parties. Coming now to the Food and Healthcare Technologies division, roughly 1 billion of sales and the profitability for the last 12 months of roughly 12 to 13%. What do they do here? The split between food and healthcare is going to be 80-20, so roughly 800 million are food, and here it can be actually anything. Meaning if you're looking at sliced cheese, for example, or sliced ham or salami that you can buy in a grocery shop, but also the extrusion technologies I've mentioned before with Barilla, or also cookies, for example, the Ferrero cookie, the Nutella biscuit that everybody knows, also the Kinderini cookies. They can actually do the entire process lines here, and hence they also have these companies as customers. And for the 20% for healthcare here, so since food is 80%, healthcare is 20%, here they do, for example, the tablet pressing, as I've mentioned before, the painkillers, or also freeze drying. And with the freeze drying, if you have a liquid medicine and you take the liquid out of it, the medicine becomes powder. It's much easier to transport. And when you go to the doctor to get the syringe, he just injects water into the powder and injects then the syringe into your arm or into your shoulder. It has a relatively high service share. And regarding the profitability, as I mentioned before, roughly 12 to 13% for the last 12 months. We still see a major upside here going into the future. Coming now to farm technologies, this is really the equipment that goes out to the farm. So if you would go to Bavaria or the Netherlands or maybe Wisconsin, you see that the farmers are using our equipment there. It's going to be either automated milking equipment, meaning you can basically run a farm with just your iPad. And sometimes from time to time, the service technician needs to come to replace parts that are broken. Or also conventional milking equipment. If you have large mega farms with multiple thousands of cows, we can install also milking carousels. They can milk basically 500 cows an hour. So we service both sides, basically the small farms with the entirely automated equipment, and also the large mega farms with the conventional equipment. What we also do here is automated feeding then, meaning we have our own feeding robot that gets all the ingredients, mixes it, and then goes to the cows and distributes it just on the farm. It has also relatively high service share, since also the machines, since the farmers are usually not electrical engineers or mechanical engineers, they're usually also then serviced by our people or our service technicians in that case. And the last division is going to be heating and refrigeration technologies. What do we do here? Let's just stick to the refrigeration side. This is going to be compressors and skids mostly. Our customers here might be your Edeka or also your Tesco here, but not necessarily the one next door, but rather the large distribution centers when you have like tons and tons of meat hanging around. There you use our large compressors, for example. And other customers here might also be, if you're an ice hockey fan, your ice hockey stadium. For example, in Berlin, we also supplied the compressors for the cooling of the ice hockey stadium. And for the heating side, we also produce large heat pumps. We're not in competition here with, for example, Wiesmann. but rather we're focusing here on large industrial sites, the ones that we're already servicing with, for example, liquid and powder technologies, or also where the apply might be district heating. So if we would heat entire districts in Berlin, for example, in Denmark or in London, there you can also use our heat pumps. Just to give you a comparison, the Wiesmann heat pump of my parents, it's like 2 meters in diameter and 1 meter tall, weighs, I don't know, a couple of 100 kilos. The one that we produce are like 12 meters long, have a weight of 6 tons, and can produce multiple megawatts of power, basically. Coming now to another important topic for our company is the sustainability topic. While we produce all these things for our customers and also for their sites, we are also then the best person actually to go to if you want to basically make your production for a zero carbon production. Here, as I mentioned before, Heineken is a customer of ours. In Manchester, we built the Heineken facility like years ago. And then again, the Heineken people talk to our salespeople, hey, we want to reduce our carbon footprint. We want to decarbonize our production facility. So they also installed then the heat pumps that I mentioned before at that site in order to save CO2. So as you see here, 5,000 tons per year just for one production site. This is really a game changer, basically. Coming now to the strategy of the company. Our strategy is called Mission 30, and as the name suggests, it goes until 30. So our goal is to grow the company by more than 5% organically every year. However, this is a CAGR figure. So as you probably know, for this year, we're guiding 2 to 4%, but we expect an acceleration, for example, also next year. And also for the entire company, our goal is also to increase the EBITDA margin from last year's 15.4% to a range of 17 to 19% by 2030. Then the third figure that is our key performance indicator is also return on capital employed. So now we're in the low 30s, basically. We wanted to increase this figure to more than 45% by 2030. How are we going to do that? We look at the company from two perspectives, from the new machine business perspective and the service perspective. So the new machine is also always going to be either a single component or entire process line, depending on the customer. We want to grow this figure by more than 4% every year. And we want to grow the service by more than 6% every year. As I mentioned before, this is a CAGR figure, so some years might be weaker, some years might be stronger, but overall, you can expect the company to grow by more than 5% by 2030. And also coming to the profitability side, how we're going to achieve the 17 to 19% profitability margin. First of all, is obviously going to be by volume and by growth. As some of you might know, service is more profitable than new machines business. And since we're also growing the service part stronger than the new machines part, but we're also growing the new machines part continuously, we expect roughly 3.5% of EBITDA margin increase here compared to last year. And the other two topics are the COGS savings that we're having and the G&A savings. So for the COGS savings, how can we still save 1.5% of profitability? If you look at our, for example, procurement department and all the suppliers that we're having, as I mentioned before, we have roughly 18,000 people working in our company. We still have more suppliers than we do have employees, meaning our goal is to reduce the number of suppliers from more than the companies having to a lower figure. But the goal here is not to go maybe from 3 suppliers to a single supplier that he becomes critical, but rather go from maybe 10 to 6. The other topic for us is the G&A savings. So back when the management started, we had 67 ERP systems within the company. So 67 different systems working just to get to a single figure of order intake and sales, for example. And our goal is by 2030 to have the entire ERP landscape homogenized onto a single one on a single ERP system. This is going to be S/4HANA, so SAP. And it's such an important project for us and also for SAP that our board members also are in regular talks with the CEO also from SAP, because we're also some sort of lighthouse project for SAP, meaning if you can convert the 67 ERP systems on a single ERP system, you can also convert them for other customers, 10 or 15. So the feedback here is positive, and the project is just ongoing. It's just a rather ongoing project, and it just takes its time. Then coming to the overall shareholder view that we're having, if you look at the figures when the new management started in 2019, the share price was roughly 13, 14 euros. And if you look at the current share price, it's roughly 64 euros. So our CEO also invested, bought 100,000 shares prior before he started. So he wasn't an insider, but he just wanted to show that he also has some skin in the game, and bought 100,000 shares. And he bought them at like 14 euros, 15 euros, something around that. And now we are trading at roughly 64 euros. The great share performance also contributed to our inclusion in the DAX index. So until recently, we were an MDAX member. And now, since we're already achieved a 10 billion market cap, we're going to be a DAX member in next week, basically. So on 22nd of September, it's going to be a change. And starting of October, information is already public. Starting of October, we will be a DAX member. For us, Sartorius left the index, and it's now an MDAX constituent. What's also important for our shareholders is increasing dividend. So we increased the dividend in the last 4 years, and our goal is also to increase it continuously. So our policy is here, roughly 50% of net profit will be distributed as a dividend. In the past, this has been usually a 5-cent increase, but our net profit increased stronger than just the 5 cents. So going into the future, we want to increase, have higher increases there, as you saw already last year, where we increased it by 15% or 15 cents. As the company is also very cash generating, we also had 2 share buyback programs in the last 4 years, where we basically bought back shares in the value of 700 million, which equated roughly 10% of the overall market cap. So just to give you maybe then overview on the current development for last quarter, our order intake increased by 5% organically, or 1.5 in reported terms. It was just an FX effect here, but we still seeing good demand for our products regarding both new machines and service. What also happened after the Q2 announcement is we signed our one of our largest orders with Baladna in Algiers, where we're going to build the largest dairy processing plant in the world. It has been announced in August, so after Q2 was basically finished. However, we didn't book the order yet because we're still waiting for the down payment. Why is this the case? Our management is very conservative. So just because somebody signs an order, it's not necessarily an order for us. We only book the order in our books if we get the down payment. And for large projects, for example, with Baladna, which is in the range of 140 million to 170 million for us, it's going to be basically a 10 to 15% down payment. So we're going to get roughly 15 to 20 million as a down payment here. And also another important topic that has been asked a lot is the ongoing tariff problematics. Roughly 18% of our sales come from the US, and roughly 2/3 of the sales that we do in the US are also sourced in the US. Just to give you an example, if we're selling a separator in Europe, it's going to be using an electrical engine from ABB, for example. And if we're selling the same separator that's built in the US, then we're going to be using, for example, a Rockwell electrical engine. We can't do everything in the US. So 1/3 of the sales is basically imported. So it's going to be built, for example, here in Oelde or in Wallau, maybe in Denmark or in northern Italy. However, we looked at our contracts when the tariffs were announced, and based on the 15% tariff agreement now, we expect that it's going to have basically a low single-digit million euro impact on our profitability, meaning it's going to be 1 to 3 million, as low single digit suggests. The current consensus is roughly 900 million of EBITDA for this year, so you can imagine that the impact is basically minuscule. What's important for us here is when we look at our contracts that all the tariffs must be paid by our customers, meaning if like a Heineken goes and builds a new brewery in the US and we get the bill from Washington, basically, this bill goes directly then to Heineken, who's going to pay for it. It's not going to run through our P&L, but rather going to be yeah, out of the picture, basically. So yeah, this is the overall view on the company and the current development. I mean, our management is very bullish since we're also looking at the backlog that we're having, at the order funnel, and hence he also expects that we will achieve more than 5% of sales increase in next year.
Mr. Biller, thanks a lot for the insights. And as you answered already a few questions that came in, I didn't want to stop you because the tariff situation is actually a quite important and an interesting one. But we've a little bit time left, and two questions are still not answered. And I would like to start with the third one. Could you provide more color on the drivers of the strong organic growth in base orders and mid-sized orders, and whether this trend is expected to continue in the second half of 2025?
Sure. So in the base orders, there's also already the service business. So we see more and more demand in service. And what we also do is we talk more and more to customers who I mean, we built the machines, but we didn't necessarily service them. And since our machines are becoming more and more interconnected, for example, we approach also these customers to offer them more and more benefits if we can maybe retrofit the machine with new sensors, when you can apply then predictive analytics. Since if you look at our machines, they usually have a maintenance schedule, and the customers stick to it because if the machine breaks down, it stops the entire production. But if we can stretch these maintenance schedules longer, the customer can save money in a nutshell. So when going here to the customers, we see more and more demand for better service solutions and also for upgrades for smaller machines if it's possible. The trend for the second half, I mean, we're going to see also an improvement in the new machines business. So this is also going to be the larger projects. But there's nothing that stops us from thinking that also base and mid-sized orders should stop the growth in H2.
Thank you for this answer. And maybe just a quick answer. What are the key factors that gave management the confidence to raise the targets for 2025?
On the one hand, it's already the order backlog that we're having. So it's the orders that are booked already, but not yet in sales. And here the factor is we don't see any cancellations. So in the last, I mean, I've been with the company for 5 years. I haven't seen any meaningful cancellations. The customer usually also don't buy 2 or 3 same pieces of equipment, but rather a single one. And also the order funnel. So the talks that we're having with our customers, it's just a question of when they're going to sign the order. Maybe it's going to be Q3, maybe Q4, but we're pretty sure that the order is going to come. So both these factors give the management the certainty that that our sales will improve this year and also next year, and the profitability.
Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, time is running fast, and that brings us to the end of this session, as the next one is in the pipeline already. Mr. Biller, a big thank you to you and to all participants. Thank you for your interest in GEA. We're looking to forward to see you at the next presentation, which will be Dr. Höhnle. And for this, I provided a link in the chat box already. But for some final words, I'd like to hand over to you again. And yeah, to all the participants, see you in the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you for the interest in the company. If you have any further questions, you can just email me at eduard.biller@gea.com. I'm more than happy to answer any following questions, or also read the research from MWB. This is also very helpful usually to understand the company. And hopefully see you next time then.
Thanks a lot. See you.